The biggest pop culture lesson I learned in the past 10 years, both personally in terms of my favorite content and professionally working as a small tinkle inside 2 streaming services, is that intellectual property, the jewel that Hollywood covets more than anything else, what they invest billions of dollars into buying, does not matter. Or at least it barely matters. And to be clear, this video isn't just gonna be a rant about why IP is a stupid thing to focus on. It's also about what Hollywood should prioritize instead. But before I get there, I think it's important to look at the actual problem first. I am a double Stark in that I am both
no one
and I
know nothing.
If you asked me 10 years ago what capital C content I would most want to exist, my precious little Christmas list would look something like a new Star Wars trilogy featuring the old cast, season-long character explorations of my favorite superheroes, and to invest the most amount of money ever allotted for a television show into a dramatization about the fall of Numenor. I still can't believe that one's real. And without exception, these ended up being some of my least favorite pieces of lowercase C- content I've ever watched. And you could easily love or hate these things, and I don't think it changes the fact that all of these projects have flaws that their fancy IP simply does not fix. And since there are already tons of videos that go into what those flaws are, I think it's more interesting to ask that same 2013 Johnny to describe content he had absolutely no interest in. Number 1, another goddamn dramedy about a toxic relationship. 2, a famous chef moves back to the family restaurant, forcing him to deal with the crazy, though eventually lovable local kooky kooks. And 3, a drama about an insufferably rich family fighting over the bones of their empire. And since I have Gwen Stefani's ska punk band levels of confidence since I have no doubt you're such a smart little video watcher, you probably already know I just described the critically acclaimed shows You're the Worst, The Bear, and Succession. Not only do they not have iconic IP, what they do have are premises that I personally find to be either unlikable or easily transferable to a hacky 90s sitcom. And yet they are by far some of the most creative and instantly compelling TV shows I've ever watched. And before you think I'm some art house snob who just doesn't like big budget franchises anymore, it's worth mentioning this same dynamic exists within A fucking tier banners of intellectual property. Last year, I was at the height of my scorned lover's bitterness for Star Wars. I did not like Kenobi, and it stained what was my only remaining nostalgic legacy character. On paper, just about the worst possible idea at the worst possible time was a Star Wars show without lightsabers or the motherfucking Force, focusing on the backstory of a forgettable, definitely dead supporting character in a one-off movie from 6 years ago. It also ended up being my favorite thing that I watched last year. And while that might just sound like a ringing endorsement for the idea that by lowering your expectations to the floor, a lot of content can't help but ankle its way into mild enjoyment, but that doesn't explain why, in the words of Hey Arnold, I don't just like you, Andor.
I actually like you,
Andor.
This is a first for me.
And I don't want to overlook the initial boost that it and shows like Better Call Saul get from existing inside beloved ecosystems, but it's clear they succeeded based on their own merit. The same way Breaking Bad found an audience without IP, and Solo lost an audience with IP. All of this pushes me to the conclusion that something more is going on here. Dan Harmon, who I really don't worship at the altar of, but I sure seem to mention a lot, before creating Community made a cult hit web series called Laser Fart about a man who unsurprisingly shoots lasers out of his ass. His rationale was that there's no such thing as a good idea or bad idea. It doesn't matter. The idea is dumb and silly, but so are people going out on a spaceship to boldly go where no one has gone before. And I think his point is that you can make a show about laser farts, or Harry Potter farts, or Jeff Bridges' crazy heart, or Mario Kart, and if you treat it with care, it can be as serious and meaningful as any prestige miniseries about beautiful movie stars pretending they're grisly detectives. It's a succinct explanation for why IP does not matter. The only thing that matters is execution. And now that I've said all that, I'm very interested to know what 2033 Johnny has to say to me. Right now, the content banner I'm most curious about is the DCU. To me, it sits as a fascinating middle ground between the kind of iconic IP that's disappointed me in the past and the more unknown stuff that generally hasn't. And since Booster Gold is not exactly Luke Skywalker in terms of recognizability, there's an army of internet dorks convinced DC will fail. And I'm not here to say they'll be proven wrong, I'm just here to say that even if they end up being right, that it sucks, their basis for thinking it'll suck sucks. Because the past 10 years have taught me that bad premises with no IP have just as much of a chance for success or failure as quote-unquote good ideas do. And also don't forget that DC's architect is the guy who turned a talking raccoon into, I think, the most nuanced remaining MCU character. My point is that as a double Stark, I have no license to offer advice, but if I could make a request to Hollywood or even just anyone doing anything creative, it would be, don't worry about perfect ideas or name brand recognition, because if it's executed well, then a premise as strange as a rich chef who shoots lasers out of his ass might just turn out to be my next favorite thing.